All right, welcome back. Our guest is here. Tokpe Fashua, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Global Analytics. At the beginning of the program, we did talk about the Naira Redesign program, the impact on 2023 elections, and the merit and demerit so far after a few weeks after that policy. Tokpe Fashua, welcome to the program, and thanks for joining us. Now, where should we start from? Do you think that, let's take a look at the process so far. At least it's been a few weeks since the program has been announced. Of course, it was announced a few months ago, but we saw pressure come when it was as if the politicians realized, oh, elections are just by the corner, and a whole lot of people started making some, talking about their concerns.
Yeah.
How would you analyze at least the last few days concerning this Naira Redesign program, and perhaps also the impact on 2023 elections before we move into other issues?
Fair enough. It's been a very harrowing few weeks, it must be said, very harrowing for the Nigerian people. Ordinarily, where we were thinking about currency redesign, but of course, by the time the program was implemented, the cash squeeze was very obvious, people having to struggle to get into the banks. And in some parts of Nigeria too, we've seen a few demonstrations, riots, destruction of bank branches and so on. It's not been easy. It's not been easy. And if I quickly say that, well, of course, part of what the president said was also that this policy was also targeted at ensuring there wasn't vote buying. I think if we look at it from that perspective, yes, you can see that we only managed to get 24 million people to vote out of 90-something million people registered. And, 24 million in 2023, it was 2019, it was 27 million. 2015, it was 29 million. 2011, it was 38 million.
Yes.
39 million, I'm even just seeing now that in 2003 it was 42 million.
Yes,
now, what this tells you,
million,
I mean, there seems to be a kind of steep decline, which may also mean that Nigerian elections are getting a bit neater. It's certainly not perfect, certainly very imperfect, but it's getting neater. And perhaps this non-availability of cash in a very crucial time like this may have contributed to that. Maybe people who weren't mobilized decided not to go out and vote, because I think that's also another thing to think about. Maybe a segment of Nigerians exist who would rather just go out to vote if someone gives them something. They are not, and of course we're still growing. I mean, we're still writing history, as you said. So the understanding of democracy is still very low in many places. They just can't be bothered. It's going to take time, and of course I think the best way to go, rather than, in my view, if they would ask me, rather than squeeze cash like that into an election, a very bad decision it turned out to be. I'd rather that we focus more on really mass education, and also ensuring that the standard of living of our people is better than it is. Because only when people are comfortable, and this has been noticed, we've repeated it so many times. In the works of Socrates and Plato, they mentioned it. Democracy will only work where people are really, really comfortable, That's what they believed, even as far back as when they existed, way back before the coming of Christ. So we're still trying to operate that. And there's nothing that is happening in our environment today that didn't happen in places like the United States in the 1800s, in the middle 1800s, even into the 1900s, even into 1930 during the Great Depression, even up to 1950, 60, and even up to today in some of the poorer areas of the United States, even in the United Kingdom. The same thing, all this vote buying, voting twice, give a cigarettes for someone to vote for you, give them pork, all of that. So our people need to also go back into history.
Vote inducement happens in the UK,
absolutely,
even as we speak now, or in the United States.
Even as we speak now in the poorer areas of the United States.
Disagree with
it's
you
the way it
that.
works. I did extensive research in this area. I put out a few articles. My articles can be rather long, but that's the reason why they're long, because I try to put everything I know out there. That's the only way I know how to go. So this has been the effect ordinarily. The truth is that the central bank is trying to really achieve the cashless society, minding the fact that there's no society that is cashless in the world. It can only be a matter of degree, even in places like Norway, Sweden.
Yes, Sweden. Sweden is a good
Yeah,
example.
where they, but there must still be cash. And people always need to know, they want the psychology of knowing that, look, if I want to use cash, I can use cash. Not that I can't, I can't even get it if I want it. That creates a certain psychology. And so what the central bank is trying to do now is to say, okay, you know what, people have actually collected this money. Can we spend the money so that the money will circulate in the system? And I believe, I'm not a staff of the central bank. I believe that whatever must be done to continue to put more cash into circulation, more new currency. Because I think there are some people who have said, oh, let them go back to the old currency. If you have to go back to the old currency, you still have to go and print the old currency. And why? I mean, are we saying that we are never going to be able to change a currency? I don't see any big deal in terms of changing currency. I think mistakes may have been made, though, in terms of evaluating the amount of currency that needs to be put back into society. Or maybe it became a shock therapy, a kind of shock treatment, to try and force this cashless. And indeed, of course, a lot of people have now gone cashless. However, that is also putting pressure on the e-systems of the banks. I mean, yesterday I tried to, and so many people, you want to send money to people, you are trying so many times. At the end of the day, you give up. That itself is affecting commerce. But I believe that, let's put it this way. As we round up politics, I believe we should please go back to normal. We want to be able to go to our banks and withdraw 100,000 cash without hassles. That is what the current law is. According to the central bank, they said we can still take 100,000 across the counter of new currency. I think we need to be able to get to that point. I really hope that this doesn't continue to be a problem. And I think that in the last few days, the pressure on the banks have reduced as well. Because we're beginning to see spontaneous spending of the new currencies in supermarkets, in different places. But people are still very, very wary, very afraid to spend, because the idea is, if I let go of this money. So all of a sudden, our currency has become so precious.
Individuals are hoarding the money.
Exactly. Well, you call it hoarding, but the thing is that people are thinking, if I spend this money, will I be able to get it back?
Exactly. So Tokwe, I hear you, but the issue also is, which I've asked. I asked even when this policy was announced. I've done several analyses on it. Can Nigeria really achieve a cashless economy, or less cash?
It's less cash. So like I told you, there's no way there's cashless. Now, mind you, there are merits and demerits with cashless society and all. A place like Germany, they don't believe in cards that much. If you are going to Germany today, you are advised to hold your euro, cash, because maybe, in fact, people traced it back to maybe their experiences with world wars. In fact, remember the Weimar Germany post-First World War, where all of a sudden you needed a wheelbarrow load of cash to go and buy a loaf of bread and all of that. So because of what they've been through, the average German doesn't even understand credit card, as in, why would I spend money that I don't have?
Yeah.
So why would you want to spend money you don't have? Please go and work and make money.
Yeah.
So you've seen stable wages in Germany. And however, that's also part of why Germany is perhaps the meanest machine, arguably in the world, and certainly in Europe, is the oppressive economy in Europe, side by side with a country like Greece that is not very productive, and people are demanding for higher wages, inflation is high. In Germany, inflation, in fact, people allege that, in terms of the currency union, that Germany basically foisted what it could do on the rest of them, maintaining 3% inflation rate and all of that. Of course, the dynamics have changed post-COVID, but in those days, they could maintain 3% inflation rate, 3% budget deficit to GDP and co. And they said, listen, everybody has to accept this, Part of the reason why UK pulled that is because they felt that was really constraining and so on. So cashless is by degree. What the central bank should probably be looking at is to say, if, for example, Nigeria was using 80% to 20%, 80% cash to 20% electronic before this policy, if you can achieve 60 to 40, that would be something. If you can achieve 50 to 50, that would be great. More people are now using electronic, must be said. Yeah. But again, the point is the frustrations of it. The fact that everybody is moving in that direction at the same time is also something that ought to have been modeled, okay? in the policy. And I think that central bank must also continue to give more space, continue to release more cash, continue to ease off the system, interact with the banks, and also go out and also scout on the streets. Okay, as I was coming now, I passed through some banks in the Gwarimpa area. I realized that Keystone had a very big crowd. I don't know why, but the other banks I passed, I think was with Access Bank and Zenith Bank. It wasn't that bad, I could see. But then I passed one bank that actually shut its gates to everybody. Now that is not good because are we saying that people's confidence in the banking sector is eroded? I don't think banks should have to close down their branches.
If we take a look at what has happened in the last few weeks, and let's dig deeper. How about if you take a look at the volume of deposits for redemption? We've seen it also, yes, we've seen it going down. I would like you to speak about
Central Bank will have more of that, but I mean, we can surmise as laymen, okay, but we can surmise that fewer and fewer people have that money around. However, maybe what obtains in Abuja or Lagos may not obtain in, for example, Kaduna State, has a certain policy in that regard, which is against what the federal government intends, We're hoping that, but I think that by and large, the way this kind of thing happens is that if old money is paid in now, central bank is destroying old money still, but they have to also gauge to find out what's going on with the banks and so on. Also, some of the old money they brought out when the president actually said they should bring out 200 Naira and allow 200 Naira to circulate. When I saw some of those monies that were pushed out, I was alarmed. I was alarmed. I felt, wow, I hope we're not trying to create another pandemic here, because I won't touch those monies anyway. So I've just been struggling. Now, we also have to think about the tiny economy, the very micro. I don't know if there's another word we could use. It's a sort of nano economy, atomic economy, call it whatever. Those guys are suffering. I mean, the 20 Naira, 30 Naira kind of market, people buying small carrots in somewhere in Gusau, you know what I'm saying, in even some of the smaller towns. They are not seeing as much cash flow. The tipping business as well. There's tipping, right? Tipping. So in America, they would even take the tip before you give them. But here they said it's corruption. I don't think it's corruption here. But if someone like me, I decide that, okay, I see a Gateman is doing well or something, or someone serves me, I should be able to give him something, right? Yeah. And I realize that a lot of the cash we carry goes in that direction. However, those guys are suffering now because they're not seeing anything. So at some point we have to begin to, I think that we need to model those. I've always advocated for those kind of economies, those very tiny people, because when we discuss our economic policies, I hardly see them mentioned. Those tiny economies, those small retailers, where are they going? And what I mean by that is that we have to think in terms of the sustainability of their businesses. How much are they contributing? How can we help them? Given that you may not be able to move from that corner shop, the malam that's selling sweets, he's never going to grow to become a ShopRite. No. He's never going to. He doesn't even have the intention. But then the truth is, you have to also think about it and say, that guy, is he making money? How much is he making? Can it sustain him in what, or should he be classified as a very poor person?
But if you take a look at other African economies, this nano or atomic or very micro businesses, you've been to Kenya several times. You know financial inclusion strategy in Kenya. Yeah. Immediately they went e-channel, the economy of Kenya transformed. M-Pesa, Safaricom boosted all of that. So
Momo now is actually doing well.
Momo. Did you understand? So even if you are going on Okada bike or anything you want, or even if you want to buy orange in Kenya, Kenyan shillings, you just take your phone, you swipe. Yeah. Even through phone.
Mobile money.
Yes, mobile.
For some reason, mobile money hasn't taken off in Nigeria.
Do you understand what I'm saying? The e-payment system. So don't you think you are also, taking a look at this micro businesses or people that are involved in, individuals that are involved in micro businesses, that we are not thinking so highly of them, because even with a phone number now, you can do a transfer.
Absolutely.
You don't need even a bank account.
No. Two things, actually, because, the literacy level in Kenya is higher than Nigeria, okay? And you look at some of those countries, Zimbabwe, has one of the highest literacy levels in the world,
Yeah.
for example.
Over 82%
I
or so.
recently returned from Rwanda. I could see the pervasiveness of Momo, for example, which is also part on MTN. I'm not advertising for them anyway. So, but I realized that we haven't actually actioned our mobile money system to a certain extent, because in order for that to work, people have to be proficient with the use of their phones, okay? Sometimes it could even be a feature phone, a dumb phone.
We have the USSD,
exactly.
which is mobile.
USSD, yes, is mobile. It's very terrible now to use. Yes, it's very terrible to use now. Port service everywhere. Sometimes some people have to wake up at 2 a.m., to do the whatever transfer they want to do. So yes, it is great. And I think from what Nancy has said, if we could action that, mobile money is very critical. And we have the licenses out here.
Yes, exactly.
All of the phone companies,
service,
Globalcom, all of those guys, they have their banks,
yes,
as it were.
Which is a new model than what we saw during Sanusi, because you remember there was a time they were like, okay, this mobile money, should it be bank-led or should it be tech-led? Now we've come back to telecoms-led.
Exactly.
I think under this administration.
I think
Sanusi,
that everybody should get that. However, there's still need for backup. When you do a transaction, it doesn't go through. Where do you run to? Can we have banks where if those guys are going to be the banks, what about their customer service? How does it work for redress and all of that? I think that this is a time for the central bank to push more in that direction and actually get those things going. Because in Nigeria, they just don't exist for small amounts to be transferred. So everybody is back to maybe their app, okay, website, app, and USSD, and they are really giving issues for now.
One of the allegations shortly after the redesign note was that the politicians connived with the bank officials, packed the new notes so they were not being seen. So the expectation was that during the elections, these monies will be brought out. But the elections, at least the presidential and national assembly elections, those are the big ones, have come. It's like we didn't see this money.
Honestly, we didn't see.
Or did we see it in another form? Or did we see it in another form? Because the EFCC,
everywhere.
Yes, the EFCC, at least even on their Twitter handle, a few days, I think it was on Saturday, while we were still in this election situation room, I read from the EFCC that it arrested a few people with voter cards, PVCs, and those people they arrested were sending money through e-payment channels for vote inducement. So,
you're right.
So whether it has taken another format, whether the money came out, but through e-channels.
Go back to that drop in the number of voters, which
24 million.
4 million. 4 million on about 4 million drops since 4 years. At a time when, as our population is increasing, we probably, even if we were looking at just 4 years ago and now, 27 million, we should be looking at about 31, 32 million people voting, averagely. So you could look at 32 minus 24, 8 million voters disappeared who could have been there in a way, So, but I think your question is about where are the cash. And again, the point then becomes that, because we live in an information age now, everybody has a smartphone. If that money was being shared somewhere, we would have seen it captured. So like Nancy had said, the FCC saw some people trying to do transfer and all of that stuff. So maybe we should wait for governorship and see whether the cash will make it out. But what concerns me most is that money needs to be spent in society. If the money is really out there, please. However, they need to be put into the system so that money becomes rife. Changing currency should not become such a big deal in a society. So we hope that money makes it out.
The president-elect, as a candidate, they were very clear that, look, when they come in, or if they win the elections, they're going to reverse this policy. Do you have those fears? That by May 29...
I don't know what limits they're going to reverse the policy. Maybe perhaps they meant extending the time for the deadline or something, because it became a very sticky issue at some point, it must be said, and very, very painful. And of course, for them as politicians, it was perhaps very, very costly as well, because apart from the idea of, oh, I want money to go and bribe people, the point is people went into an election very angry, all right? And that's very costly for the ruling party, who almost got toppled between the two other big parties, now Labour is a big party, whether anybody likes it or not. There was 13 million votes, as against 8 million votes from the winning party. And you see that this 8 million vote for the winning party is the lowest votes we have got in perhaps
since
the beginning, 1999,
99,
for a winning party. You know, so we know there's been a raft of economic errors that have been made, including, of course, acts of God like COVID, you know, that shut down the economy, and people are still struggling to come back. And then the cash policy came with all these, constrictions and so on, and people went into that's why he made it. Maybe the president, the incoming president, if he would action that depends on him when he takes over in May 29. But of course, you may not be able to go and bring the old cash if the cash has been destroyed. However, maybe what they could do is to accelerate the volume of new cash that is pumped into the system, and to say, okay, you know what, maybe we may not be able to achieve this cashless to the limit. If the idea was to achieve 80 cashless, 20 cash, we may think of, listen, let's push more money into the system and reduce this thing to about 70-30 or 60-40 or something. Because what is obvious is that to some extent, the Nigerian economy, as constituted with a large informal economy and the inadequacies of the banks as well, may not be ready for the very strict cashless that we were talking about. You know, and of course, the banks also have some blame, it must be said. You know, whereas in terms of how much investments have they made into their e-channels over time. So it's not good enough for you to just declare all those huge profits. But they weren't also ready for the deluge when it came. A few banks totally lost it for 2 or 3 days. I don't have to mention their names. Where the system shut down, everything shut down, they didn't know what was what. People had paid money, they couldn't trace it. People had done transfer, they had debited on one side, it hadn't, and so that happened. But this is also a time for them to reinvest. However, in the long term, as an economist, I'm thinking that the entire system, including central banks, should be wary and careful about how this will impact on employment, especially in the banking sector. If we're moving towards a point where we'll just have 1 or 2 robots and the MD, all right, running the entire system, where do the other people that are working in the bank, where do they go? Because the cashless also means that a lot of people will just, have to be let go. And it's been bad enough as it is. A lot of people have been casualized already. So
is it not an opportunity for the banks to possibly even expand? In Kano, with 44 local governments, we are told just about 20, 22.
You're very correct.
So it means the others can...
Now, you're very correct. This is also one of the revelations of the times, because in a place like Borno too, maybe because of insurgency, 4 local governments out of 27, in fact 3. Yobe, maybe 4 out of 20 or so. Even in places like Ekiti State, if you don't get to Ado Ekiti, maybe the Ikere 1 or 2. And you know what? As of 1984, we had more rural branches than we do today.
No, but can we flip this conversation and say that too? Must banks, physical banks, be everywhere across the country, or even the 44 local governments, which you've talked about in Kano? Doesn't it open an opportunity for like super agents? There'll be new jobs that are created. There will be e-payment channels, agents, PSBs are on now, payment services banks, and all of that. So must we have physical banks to be able to bank those people?
The model has changed.
Yes,
the model is changing. The model has changed. They are not going to go back. They are not going to go back. But this policy was what revealed it. Because all of a sudden, so people should take their money to wherever, and then people have to travel long distances. We never knew it was that bad, honestly. It was shocking. And of course, even the central bank had to send a lot of their officers. They had to send a lot of their top officers to different places to go and intercede and see exactly what's going on, in real time, But yes, of course, there'll be super agents, there'll be PSBs and so on.
New jobs will
all
be
sorts
created.
of people. Yes, hopefully. But mind you, that if we're talking about a huge illiterate population, they prefer the old model. It's a shock therapy. But it's good.
How about the
Shock
POS?
therapy.
How about the POS agents that are already in the villages? That anywhere you go, like at least when you go to the villages, you just give the person cash, and the person will be able to
like
transfer.
it, but I don't also like it,
Why?
because oftentimes I see that they are quite vulnerable.
Okay.
So you go to all those villages and you see them, they're just saying, and they're supposed to be carrying money, right?
Yes.
So if you wanted, in those, before the policy, you could go and withdraw 100,000 and they just bring it from one. And I'm thinking, wow, this is a new banking
Exactly.
in Nigeria. And,
Yeah, of course.
Again, I'm not very, very big on that
Because
policy.
of security?
Honestly speaking, I think I'm a big,
But if you look at it on the flip side,
I think that we also should, I don't know about, maybe we're not talking about renting huge offices now, because the central bank had to come out at some point to say that, look, if you see a POS agent that doesn't have a kiosk, it may be illegal, or whether he's illegal. That's what they said, but most of them that I see around the country don't even have the kiosk. So again, we may need to actually say, fine, if we're going down that road, even if we're going to be using invisible channels and so on, if people have problems with their transfers, where do they go? Number two, what do we do about the risk of people actually getting duped or swindled? And given the fact that there are so many people who do Yahoo and all of those things, whose work is to play tricks on people. I mean, we saw an instance where someone said, look, we could generate a fake alert. But what I'm not quite sure about, they said there's even one that will show pro bank, but the thing will take your old balance and add the new. And I'm wondering, how does it get my old balance? Because if you get it, they say all you need to do is look out for pro bank. This is education to whoever is listening at home. That if you see an alert and you see pro bank there, because there's a certain app that is, what it does is generate alerts, And so if you see pro bank, know that it is a fake alert. But someone who didn't go to school may not be able to read pro bank, number one. Number two, they said that so-called pro bank will actually get your last balance and add the new money and show you a true. And I'm wondering, how do you get that last balance? I'm not sure about that. But they said it is what it is, So all of these things will happen. What we're seeing, I wrote an article recently which I titled "The Need for Nigeria to have a new, a rejigged financial infrastructure." We need to generally sit and think. All of this time now, what's been happening is I think that there hasn't been a big meeting hall of people, stakeholders, including customers, to say, how do we go forward? I think that that's something that central bank may need to invest in, to say, because this has to change. What is on ground, obviously, is fairly inadequate, and we're passing through this process right now. There's a need for us to have a proper sit-down. But in the meantime, everybody should be patient. Let's see how things pan out. Use the e-channels more as much as you can. Banks also should please invest more and make this easier for us. Central bank also should continue to feel the pulse of the people, because the people are, the ultimate customers, especially those small customers. A big customer may not, a private banking customer may not have to go and hustle, whatever. Sometimes some guys are so big, if they owe you is when they pay you, right? But a small person cannot sleep in his house in Maraba because he's owing someone. He's owing someone 50,000 naira. The guy is banging his door and embarrassing him. He has to go and queue up at the bank and keep going to queue up and so on. And even though he just wants to meet his obligations.
Some of us were thinking, maybe before this mobile money infrastructure comes up and all of that, the situation we had was also an opportunity for banks to maybe send out their staff to these small businesses and persons to open accounts for them.
That's supposed to be
because a number of these guys don't just have accounts. But if they have accounts, one, that's the first step. They can say, okay, you can pay, transfer, and we can start from there.
There's a banks should see it as an opportunity of having new customers.
Because they cannot even go to the banks, to say, okay, the identity card and all of. But if the banks get to where they are, open the accounts for them, the BVN and all of that would have be heading somewhere.
Certainly, that's part of the idea behind CBN's policy, that in order to not only cashless alone, but also to reduce the number of the unbanked. Okay, and at this point in time, the banks should not just sit back and believe that the customers will come. You have to go. However, of course, that is a risk. There are boys who are employed in the banking sector. that go out and collect money on behalf of the bank, and the money doesn't make it back to the bank.
But which banks are we talking about? Because the category of people you're talking about, TV, fall under the microfinance banks.
Oh, no, wait.
Yes, the microfinance bank should be saddled with what you're
right.
just saying.
You're right.
Not the big commercial banks.
No, every bank plays there.
Yes, which every bank plays there. But the micro, yes, every bank plays there, but the microfinance banking, why they were established, why we have the microfinancing model is to fill that gap. But we see, we've been in this country.
About
microfinance people have been operating like commercial banks. The microfinance people are supposed to be the ones in those villages, for example. This Naira redesign to even go to those banks and change.
No, mind you that a lot of the microfinances banks have collapsed, honestly.
Yes, but we still have close to 800. We once
toyed with community banking.
Maybe one branch.
It went down. Then microfinance.
You know they have different strata. Yes, there are some units, there are some regional, there are some for the.
So we've toyed with that model. Again, is what I believe that needs to be relooked at. Minding the fact that from my understanding of microfinance banks, they weren't supposed to be competing with banks for deposits. They are supposed to get their monies from grants and
micro
all of those
businesses
things.
and
But
co.
it never quite worked. It never quite worked, So it's a good time to go back and look at those models. Like you said, but a lot of things are changing so rapidly, including the fact that what Nancy said earlier on about, do we even need physical branches anywhere anymore? It's a question that needs to be asked. Or maybe each village will have a hub that will represent every bank. That is not specific to any bank, but if you have a problem with your
just like the
airports, a model. You know what I'm saying?
Just like your airports, everybody has a
exactly.
station.
This is an idea I'm giving them now. They should pay. You should pay me something for this.
We'll take note of that today.
So maybe every village, because we are realizing now that
every bank can invest in or something.
So until the central bank staff started moving to the field, they also realized that there are some people who didn't even hear that policy was coming since October. They didn't even hear in some remote villages in this country. So of course there's no policy that is perfect. The idea behind policy making is also to continue to, as you get more information, you see what you can rejig. But I wanted to say something about Nigerian banks. A lot of them are my friends. I was an ex-banker as well. But we're realizing that Nigerian banks export banking, right? If you went to Liberia, all the banks in Liberia are Nigerian banks. In Sierra Leone, in Ghana, we're teaching. However, we have this problem with unbanked here. It doesn't speak well that we have this huge number of unbanked people, and we're going to Uganda, to Rwanda, to South Africa, to London, to New York, to Dubai, to open banks. It therefore means that a bankers committee meeting needs to be held between the central bank governor and his friends who are MDs of banks. Say, guys, what do we do about this on bank? What kind of model can we evolve? Or if they won't take it up, then maybe talk to fintechs. If fintechs can help, technology can come in.
Fintech is already doing that.
They may be able to help, but the real issue there is still about the physical cash and the small money and the literacy issue in order for e-banking to be able to work in those places. But again, I personally don't believe there's any problem that's too hard. If we sat down, just as we sat down here now, we're bringing out new models. But I believe that when those smart guys sit down and have a very honest discussion, they can come up with very good ideas.
Before, I wanted us to look at this issue before we let you go, because I'm looking at the time too. We did talk about state governors and state governments. I don't know if you've realized that most state governors now, or state governments, have now put e-payment platforms in place. I also want you to take a look at when even the president announced that the 200 Naira notes should be accepted. Some people are still rejecting the old 200 Naira notes, even after the president's broadcast. And we should also note that the old Naira notes coming to the central bank now are dirty and tattered, just like you talked about, which will still be destroyed. Let's also take a look at, I'm munching all my questions together, and I know you are smart enough to follow me on that. The cost of printing the old notes is the same thing as the cost of printing the new Naira notes. That shouldn't be lost on us. No one is also ready to accept the old Naira notes right now, as people are like even ignoring the courts or even ignoring the state governors. So everyone wants the new Naira notes, even government agencies, as we speak. they want the old, the new Naira notes. And
Yeah.
as we're seeing it now, just like you mentioned earlier, the new Naira notes are trickling down. So how do you want to answer these questions?
Well, there's a number of issues packed in there. It's great that the states are
Governors are
putting
having
in
e-plan
electronic
yeah,
channels.
yeah.
What that does, which is one of the aims and ambitions from the beginning, is that it increases. We're going to be seeing an increase in the value for money on public procurement in the public sector, which will work for the incoming government because all of a sudden they'll find out that, look, they are working in environments that are mostly e-enabled, and therefore, there's a constraint to which you can actually, people are not collecting taxes and putting it in their pocket. People are paying directly into electronic channels and so on. So every society benefits from that level of increased transparency. However, as you go down the line, what we should try and ensure is, as you go down the line, for large amounts, electronic, fine. For small amounts, where people should have a choice between electronic and cash. In terms of the 200 Naira, of course, psychologically, I personally won't take the old 200 Naira from any, I'm just saying. That's me, that's my own policy. I'd rather not have the cash. But again, like I said, it impacts on a few people around me. If I want to give someone money spontaneously,
yes, I don't have it
if I want to be nice to people, I can no longer be nice to people. If I want to give someone spontaneous money and all of that, if I want to, if somebody actually has a need, a small need, and it requires me to quickly make a transfer, if it doesn't go once or twice, that person is going to be abandoned. So we have to still think about those smaller people. However, the bottom line from what Nancy has reeled out in terms of the accessibility of the 200 Naira, the printing of new currencies, this and that, is that let our people be a bit patient. The problem is ebbing out a little bit. Maybe by the time we have the March 11 elections, it will further ease out, Maybe those who allegedly are keeping the new currency will begin to, they don't have a choice because you can't just keep it, you have to spend it. Only that, mind you, the psychology behind new money, any time, is that even before this policy came, I don't want to use in those days because it's looking so far away now when we could actually carry some cash. I would, if I withdrew new money, that means I want to spend it slower.
Yes, so and you want to spend it for occasions.
Yes, something
like
for
OMB and Co, because that's when people look for new cash.
I don't spray.
Yeah, I know you don't spray.
They know themselves, but the point is this.
But at least you put it in the envelope to give gifts.
If I change new money, I
spend it slower.
So that's just a standard. A standard in
not
Nigeria,
just for you, for a lot of people.
In Nigeria here, that's our standard thinking. It's a great policy the central bank has brought. Implementation is a little bit shaky. People are still suffering. I must advocate for that, for people who I saw today who are still struggling to get into their banks. But with a bit of patience, I believe that we'll get over this. And so, and I believe also whatever can be done to push in more new currency into circulation, good for us.
I attended a wedding recently, and the bank account number of the groom and the bride. They wrote them out, table by table. And you had to make the transfer.
Nigerians must come up.
There's another innovation.
Yes, there's another innovation. The one of the voucher? Is that what the one you're talking about?
A new voucher.
So a new voucher.
You pay them, you collect the voucher. They send the money to the account.
Yes,
so you can see display, right?
Yes, you can still display.
Throw the money up and show how much of a big man you are.
Nigerians and just, when I saw that, I was surprised, as in they printed like 500 Naira voucher for 1,000.
At least we can innovate that one. Even if we cannot innovate our electricity, at least we can innovate Owambe. It's something.
You are an ex-banker.
I'm not. I actually don't ever claim to be an expert. It's them Nancy and Koga are experts.
No, I said ex-banker.
Ex-banker.
Oh, ex-banker, yes. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe you educate some of us. My local government, for instance, have been struggling.
Where is that, please?
Taka local government
in Benue State.
We've been struggling to have a bank branch. We toil with the idea of a microfinance.
Are you you never had a branch?
We don't have.
Up till now?
Up till now. We have a federal polytechnic there.
Is it the local government you're talking about?
The entire local government. In fact, in the senatorial district of about 7 local governments, only 3 have banks. The other 4 don't have. In our case, we've been struggling. We had to fill write some letters, meet some banks. They gave you know, conditions. Some of us made commitments that would open accounts there and be operating. You know, so what is the criteria, for instance, to set up a branch of a bank anyway?
Sorry, can I just say something?
Yes.
Sorry, but we're also talking about getting banks into areas. Don't forget that the banks are also businesses, and they look at how
Absolutely. Well,
viable the area is. So you don't say,
We have 3 huge markets.
so I just needed to bring that in, because it's not everywhere that you get
Remember-
to see a bank. How viable is that area? Would perhaps a microfinance bank work?
Yeah, that's what
But-
will work for them.
For
And
them.
let me tell you this.
Like in my village, there's a microfinance bank in my village.
You know that you, Nancy, you come from the bank belts of Nigeria. your uncles own all the banks anyway, so why wouldn't there be a standard Zenith bank? In your,
No, but
in
there's
your
no,
village?
okay.
So I'm just kidding. Anyway,
Just not for
I'm just
dropping
kidding.
names, but there is
you
a
know what?
microfinance bank in my village.
Inside the village, yeah.
Yes.
So now the thing is, of course, the critical consideration
The viability.
the critical consideration is, can we make money in
Yes.
this place? And even if they found out that they could make even 100,000 profit after expenditure, perhaps they will come.
Yeah.
Now, but where you're coming from is a very emotional
Important,
place
yeah.
for me, because what he's saying is, look, you know, the mere fact of citing a kind of modern building structure in a village shows a sign of progress in that village, okay? Call it a village. I was surprised when even the Senate president, initially, when the Senate president said that in his entire senatorial area, there's no bank. I said, wow, you know. So now, because I wanted to ask you, even in the days of Lion Bank, that was Benue State Bank. There was no, but in my time, in 1984, in many of those villages or towns of Ekiti and Ondo State, we had, if you don't have a Wena Bank, you will have a cooperative bank or national
People's bank.
You know,
Yes.
in the East, you'd have cooperative and commerce
Yes.
bank. You'd
Yes.
have mercantile bank,
Yes.
in you know. However, of course, in time, technology came. Some of them were not that efficiently run. Governments had put their hands in it and taken so much loans, they went down. What I think we're standing at the epoch of a new infrastructure, a new, in fact, call it superstructure, in fact, a new architecture, a new banking architecture, including this one we suggested, where maybe you would have a banking hub
with
that will
different
not
banks.
be exactly.
I think
somewhere
CBN
that
should
can
take a
connect
look at that.
where they
We've
can
just given
talk to
them a solution.
because these villagers want to go to a place and talk to someone that looks corporate and say, okay,
Yes.
I sent 5,000 yesterday, I know
Yes.
Siam. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we say, okay, you know what, this is what I can help you to do. Oh, yeah, log it here. Where's your phone number? We'll call you.
Exactly.
They need that interaction. We cannot leave them in that village to oblivion and say, well, if you cannot, because in some places, even ordinary phone, what's it called, signal is a problem. But for as many places as can have a, what's it called, a mast that, and the phone can get there, we now need to move. So this is another business, okay? It's another job creation. Call it customer service care officers. Maybe companies will have to come. That's a new model. Companies will have to come, register with CBN as customer service agent. They may not deal with cash. But with the electronic thing, they are experts at communicating with the banks for those villagers so that they can feel like they belong. Because what we're seeing is a further urbanization of everything. We're leaving those villages in the lodge. And some of them, they trade, they have farm products, but they have to suffer and struggle in order to even get their monies from whatever it is they sell. So that's a good one. Mr. I didn't get your name.
Mr. Teve.
Mr. Teve.
Okay. I think, Tokma, that's much we can take on this segment. Thank you very much for
It's been a very interactive
very good one, isn't it? I'm feeling so. And a lot of solutions we've brought out here. And education as well as enlightenment. So, Teve, welcome to my part of broadcasting. I hope you enjoyed it. Perhaps you should be my trainee.
But you know, it's not everybody that's like me, so he has to book me ahead of time.
All right, that's the much you can say. Let's quickly take a break, and when we return from the break, we'll be going over to the news.